Hi, I'm Josh Rushing, filling in for Lisa Fletcher today, and you are in the stream. The robotics revolution as military weaponry advances. What will the future of battle look like? And what ethical hurdles will we face? Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is here looking out for your live feedback. Malika, nothing gets the community going other than talking about robots at war.
That's exactly right. And most of our community is tweeting us about drones, but that may be because they're not as familiar with the other ways that robotics can be used. So for those of you at home, if you have thoughts on how robots could impact civilian life, tweet us. Use the hashtag AJStream.
Joining us on set is Sharon Weinberger, the national security writer at the Wilson Center, where she's working on the history of the Pentagon's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is better known as DARPA. Welcome to the stream, Sharon.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure. Remember, you can stay in touch with the stream on a number of social media sites, like, for example, the stream. Just follow us at AJStream. And you can tell us there what stories matter to you. Now, here's a look at some of the Twitter hashtags you're following. As roles of engagement continue to evolve, militaries are adapting their tactics to include increasing use of unmanned weaponry. What usually comes to mind are the all too common images of drone strikes. Now, these pilotless aircraft have become the weapon of choice for the U.S. government. Under President Barack Obama, nearly 300 drone attacks have been carried out, mainly in Pakistan and Yemen. And although Washington is currently leading the way, more than 60 countries are also developing their own version of drones. Behind this hot-button issue lies a military robotics market that is expected to exceed, and get this, $8 billion by 2016. DARPA, the research arm of the U.S. Department of Defense, is funding the creation of robots that can operate on land, sea, and in the air. From the LS-3, a semi-autonomous four-legged robot that carries 400 pounds and can follow squad members through rough terrain, to the Scout X-Teeth robot that sends back live images after being thrown anywhere, to the Cheetah, which is creepy and can reach up to 45 kilometers per hour. Now, it's faster than Olympic gold medalist Usain Bolt. Military technology is progressing at a rapid pace, but this industry isn't only developing machinery that's finding its way onto the battlefield, but also civilian life as well. So, as integration escalates and these machines become more autonomous, what legal and ethical issues arise? Joining us from the United Kingdom is Noel Sharkey, professor of artificial intelligence and robotics at the University of Sheffield. Also with us from Germany is Wolfram Bogard, professor of computer science and the head of the research lab for autonomous intelligent systems at the University of Freiburg. Welcome to the stream, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Hi. Sure. So I'd like to start with Sharon. Right now you're writing a book about DARPA, and if you can, give our audience a sense of what DARPA is and then how it connects to this.
Sure. DARPA is basically sort of the independent research and development arm of the Pentagon, but it's responsible for a very specific mission, which is far-out research. They're tasked for sort of preventing technological surprise, so they'll fund ideas that the military services won't do, a lot of which will be in robotics, unmanned systems, things that may not be used on the battlefield in 5 years or even 10 years, but maybe 20 years. So it's very much on that far-out research end of things.
Well, I reported on this subject a while back for another show that I host called Fault Lines, and I reached out to, say, over 100 universities and robot companies looking for interviews to get access to what they were doing. Every single one, almost every single one, had money going back to DARPA or the Pentagon in some way. Has that been the case in your research? And if so, how does that affect the development of this technology?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, DARPA has created whole departments. I think robotics is part of that. They develop computer science departments, sort of the modern computer science revolution. So they'll fund sort of centers of excellence. So it's not surprising that robotics at the universities as well as industries tie back to DARPA. It does influence things. DARPA is interested in applications. It's interested in applications for the military. So as opposed to funding perhaps from the National Science Foundation, what that will do is it will tilt what academics and industry are doing towards military applications. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is a different perspective. It's proved to be a successful innovation strategy.
Well, it's brought around things like the internet was invented by Darpa Is with GPS, but I just have to wonder if the military is what's driving it. You're going to get what you're looking for at the end of the day. Malika, what are they saying about that in the community?
Well, speaking of that, that's a good point that you just raised, Josh. There's a tweet here from Moboso who says, this will lead to less human casualties for countries who can afford weaponry and more suffering for its targets. No, there's also a video comment here that I'd like to direct to you. Have a listen to this.
My name is Hamza. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and I think that the American public would support unmanned war technology. This just seems like it's a natural progression that war is headed. We were fighting with swords and knives, then with guns, and now with missiles and drones. And I think that the American public sees this as a way to keep their soldiers safer, although civilians I can't really say the same for. And I just think that this is the way that the future of war will look like.
So Noel, is this the way forward? Noel, is this the way forward? This keeping U.S. soldiers safe?
Are you speaking to me?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Well, it is certainly going to keep soldiers safer, and it might keep US soldiers safer for a time being, but it's a rather blinkered view, if you don't mind me saying so, because the problem is that there, as you've mentioned yourself, there are many countries. I've tracked 51 countries that are getting the technology now. So it might keep soldiers safe for now. But what happens when everybody has the weapons, when everybody has these robot weapons? And sometimes you see in blog sites people saying, oh, this is really cool. The robots will be fighting the robots and then nobody will be hurt. But who's going to give up then? We've already got massive asymmetrical warfare. We've seen what the United States was able to do in Iraq and Afghanistan. It was able to win the war in no time whatsoever. So-called win the war. But of course people don't give up when you get that kind of asymmetry. So the robots would still have to go around slaughtering people.
Noel, you're pushing for an international treaty regarding the use of robots in military force. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, at the moment we've got drones. Everybody knows about the drones, and there have been a lot of mishaps with the drones. I mean, there are a lot of innocent civilians being killed, etc. But my concern is really the next step, and it's got to do with the US military plans and Japan, China, Russia as well, and Iran. And the idea is to make autonomous weapons, so you have autonomous lethal targeting. And as the last viewer said, this is like the final step in the Industrial Revolution. It's a clean factory of death for the sides that have the technology. So an autonomous robot really, we shouldn't think of this as a thinking machine. What an autonomous robot is, it's something that can take off and land itself. It can fly around, and when people are talking about robots making decisions, it's a kind of decision like if-then. So I could send a robot plane, for instance, to a particular region, and when it gets to particular GPS coordinates, if it detects a heat signature, it could release its weapon. Now, the big problem for me, the ethical problem and the international humanitarian law problem, is the principle of distinction, which is the foundation of the Geneva Conventions. Now, the principle of distinction says that you have to be able to discriminate between a civilian and a combatant. But it's not just a combatant, it can be, a mentally ill combatant, a combatant trying to surrender. We have no robot systems whatsoever that can do this. We don't even have a definition of civilian that works, that you could specify to a robot. And the thing is, the sensing apparatus we've got, the vision systems we've got, can just about tell you when something's an animal or a car. So it can't really tell the difference between an insurgent and an ordinary civilian. And even if it could, even if you get some sort of minor discrimination here, the point is that it's a lot of times it's inappropriate to kill. You might have the whole village, going against you, whatever. There's an instance, for instance, where American soldiers had some insurgents trapped in an alley. They were Marines, and they lifted their machine guns to kill them. And then they noticed the insurgents were carrying a coffin. So what they did was they lowered their machine guns, took off their helmets, bowed their heads, and let them pass. Now, there are an infinite number, practically, a very, very large number of circumstances like this when it wouldn't be appropriate to kill. A robot can't do that kind of reasoning. Well, it hasn't got situational awareness. It doesn't have agency. And the other thing is making proportion.
We have a professor who's working on artificial intelligence and designing this on the show today. Wolfram, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Wolfram, how close are we to having a robot that could have the kind of the ability to tell a civilian from a combatant, as Noel brings up there?
I mean, I must admit we are pretty far away from that, and I don't think that we will have a solution to that question or problem in the very near future. But to be honest, I do not fully agree with that what I heard before, namely that robots are only the aggressors in such a situation. Right? It could even be that in a case where you actually want to defend yourself, right, it might be safer to send a robot or use a robot instead of a person. Right? And then things become different, right? You might have drones that you want to prevent your country from being attacked by, and in such a case, a robot might be way better than sending out humans.
And I'm also curious, Wolfram, as I brought up before, when I researched this in the U.S. for a story for another show, it seemed to me that every robotics program I contacted, be it at a public university or a private company, seemed to be connected in some way back to Pentagon dollars. Is the same true in Germany? Are you getting military funding in your school there for this type of study?
No, not at all. So it's pretty unfamiliar in Europe and especially in Germany. The situation in Germany is special because of the history, the Second World War, so which has made military research pretty unpopular. One needs to respect the history of the United States a little bit, which actually felt substantially attacked after September 11, and where almost every funding in the area of robotics has been cut down and is only being provided by Darpa. So all these scientists are basically faced with the question of doing no research at all or doing a DARPA-funded research.
Well, Sharon, as Wolfram mentioned a little bit earlier, he said it might be safer to use robotics, but does this raise ethical and legal implications? As our community members are asking on our tweets, it would still be a human pushing the button, the same human who could push the button to launch a nuclear bomb. And before you answer that, listen to this video commenter along the same lines.
Hi, my name is Nash, and I'm from the Philippines. There's no doubt that we can create perfect machines, perfect robots to fight our wars for us, but I'd always like to ask, to what end? They can be more perfect, they can attack targets, they can be more accurate, but if at the end of the day you'll just have another war where there are more casualties and less people who are willing to be held accountable, then what gives, right?
What gives?
Yeah, well, I worry a bit that we're collapsing a bit an important issue, which is whether you should assign control, life or death decisions to robots, to the reality of today. And the reality of today is that automation let's talk about ground robotics. This is at the most basic level. I think the most commonly deployed robot in Afghanistan today is the PackBot, which is developed by iRobot. It's the company that also has the little vacuum cleaners. Mm-hmm. So the extent of PackBot's automation, it just got an automation upgrade, was when it loses contact with its operator, because it's operated by a soldier, for example, with a joystick. The automation part is if it loses that contact, it'll reverse back to the last point it was in contact. That's the extent of its automation, reversing back. It's not dismantling bombs on its own. It's not going between waypoints yet. It may someday, very soon, with some of the automation that's coming in. This is the level it's at. No one in the Pentagon is talking about taking man out of the loop, as sort of the Pentagon jargon goes, on weaponry, and nor do we have ground robots in the field that have weapons on them. The drones or the unmanned aerial systems that we have operating that are armed are operated by operators, weapons releases through operators. And when we talk about when this could happen in the future, we're a long way from that. A landmine, in a sense, is an automated system. It doesn't have a human in the loop. Mm-hmm. So the sentiment I agree with. Yes, we should have a person in the loop, but let's not collapse this with science fiction. That's not where we're at today.
But where we are, and the PackBots that I've seen in the field, I was a Marine for about 14 years, did have a shotgun on it, and the shotgun could be used in disarming, say, a bomb or an IED by firing at it. But I mean, a shotgun can fire at a human just as easy as it can an IED, and a PackBot can be sent in first into a house that could possibly have enemy or insurgents or whatever, and it could use the shotgun, and the guy controlling it could be 30 meters away, or with drone technology could be in Nevada. So I want to ask Noel why it seems today that we're okay with drones having lethal strikes, but we don't seem to be okay with ground-based robots in the same situation where it's a human at the controls, be it 30 meters or around the world. We're not comfortable with ground-based robots killing humans yet. What's the real difference, whether it's in the air from a drone or on the ground as a packbot?
Well, there's a very big difference, but I'm not okay with the drone strikes, by the way, before we go any further, just let me say that. But there have been, there were 4 Foster Miller's robots called the Talon Sword sent to Iraq about 4 years ago, fully armed. They could have machine guns, grenade launchers, everything else. But there's a very big difference on the ground, because on the ground you've got you can get mud stuck in the tracks. In fact, the special forces told me that what they called the robots that were sent there with the machine guns on them were the TRVs. That's the Taliban resupply vehicle, because they could just kick them over and take the machine gun off them. You could throw a towel over them and blind their sensors.
But that's an engineering issue, not an ethical issue.
It's not an ethical issue, no. There's certainly plenty of ethical issues with just killing people, but I don't see that there'd be any difference between doing strikes on the ground with a robot than doing strikes from the air if there's a person in the loop. But the thing about the drones in the air, it takes a second and a half when you move the joystick to move the control, and that's okay in the air, but if you're on the ground it's not okay. And I very much agree with the DARPA lady who was just speaking about the
Sharon.
bomb disposal robots, but I would like to see a lot more funding going into those and making them autonomous and saving young soldiers' lives instead of all an offensive stuff. So exactly the same issues with ground robots and non-ground robots. And I have to say, if I may, this business about the lady saying this is science fiction, there's the X-47B, which has undergone a lot of testing, and it's going to be on all US aircraft carriers in the Pacific by 2015. It's a fully autonomous aircraft. And I've talked to Dan Quayler about this, who's the head of the Congressman Dan Quayler, who's the head of the Unmanned Caucus in the United States. And he said to me, this was on a BBC program, of course there will be a man in the loop to write the program to send it out to the missions. So it's not science fiction, and I think it's going to be coming very soon. And as soon as one force has it, another force will have it.
I imagine you're going to respond about the X-47B.
Yeah, it's not going to be anywhere in the next 3 years. I think that there's a difference between when you look at congressional testimony from 5-6 years ago. A lot of these programs, because of the technical complexity, have been scaled back. X-47B is one of those. I don't know that there's any firm operational deployment plans for it right now. And I think just based on where the program is, it would be several to many years away, and not 2015. But the truth is that where money has been going, if we talk about ground robots over the past 10 years, is really it's been going towards logistics and supply. When they've looked at what is technologically capable and what do soldiers want, they want to get out of the missions that are not core to, being a soldier, meaning fighting wars, but that are dangerous. And logistics and supply is one of those. So we've seen a lot of programs shift towards unmanned resupply vehicles. That's where the money is going. If anything, I would say it's not, when we talk about ground systems, going towards a robot taking the place of a soldier fighting. That's not where I see the technology going. It's not where the emphasis is.
Well, it's a good chance to advance this discussion, actually, and we can go to our community for this. But it's not just about the military implications of these type of technologies. Bill Gates said recently that we are today with automation and robots where we were in 1982 with PCs. That this is kind of the next chapter in the information age, and the automation is going to be all around us in the years to come. Last part, mine, not Bill Gates, but that's what I took it to mean. Is the community saying anything about that?
They are, and I think you just raised a point that is kind of the bridge between those two things, between computing and robotics. Franco Smith says the use of drones or robotics in war will only dull human ethics even more. It's like playing PlayStation with real people. And Wolfram, I'd like to direct this next one to you. It's along the same lines. It's from Ala Hamed on Twitter, who says the growing use of unmanned weaponry desensitizes war, making it more like a video game.
Yeah, there's a danger that this might happen, and it might be like easier to send out a weapon if no human is involved, and this is something that we need to be aware of. But this is, let's say, the negative side of robotics, that we can actually have robots as weapons. But if you think about the opportunity to defend people, then robotics makes sense, or the use of robots makes sense. So, for example, we have humanitarian missions where we send German soldiers to Afghanistan, and they are all also endangered of being attacked by whatsoever people over there. And then using robots in dangerous situations makes a lot of sense instead of sending a dead soldier home.
Sharon, now bring us back to you. We have a short time left, but I'm curious, what big DARPA projects now will be affecting our lives and our society in, say, one year out and even 5 years from now?
In the area of robotics.
And there's automation robotics.
Well, I think automation. I mean, that's sort of the next frontier because we don't have a lot of automation yet. We don't have it with the drones that are operating over Afghanistan or Pakistan. We certainly don't have it with the ground robotics. So that will be sort of the next frontier. I just don't think it's today. I don't think it's in 5 years. It may be in 10, 15, 20 years. But I think that automation,
even like with Google cars, though, with California agreeing to allow driverless cars.
Exactly, and so the Google cars, of course, started with the DARPA Grand Challenge, this idea of having an automated car driving through the desert, first just as a race and then around obstacles. That may hit the commercial area much before it hits the military area. But that is the next frontier, is automation. That's what we don't have today.
Noel, I got about a minute left, but I want to come to you. The U.S. Air Force now is training more drone pilots than human pilots. I guess they're both humans, but to operate unmanned aircraft rather than manned aircraft. And that's because the U.S. Air Force is now buying more unmanned aircraft than manned aircraft. What is this going to mean for the world in, say, the 1 to 3 years to come? And you have about 1 minute.
Well, one of the problems is that you always have when you have a JAG lawyer, a judge advocate's lawyer, on the line helping the troops make the decisions, that's one thing. But you haven't got enough lawyers, so you're going to have so many young people with a Game Boy mentality operating these systems. And it's to say it's okay when they're under supervision, but when they're not under supervision, there are some very bad things that can happen. We've seen many cases of mistakes being made, and when you read the transcripts of the trials, that's quite bad, quite silly things. It's almost like Top Gun, and we need better training of these pilots, better ethical training.
All right, well, we're going to talk about that more in the post show. Thank you for that. Thank you to all our guests for being here today. And now here's Malika with some leads that we're following.
The Austrian daredevil who broke the sound barrier and the record for highest skydive has also scored another feat. Felix Baumgartner's jump from 39 kilometers above the surface of the planet broke a record on YouTube as well. At the peak of his dive, YouTube says there were more than 8 million concurrent live streams of the event, broadcast on the channel of energy drink Red Bull, which sponsored the jump. The skydive reverberated across the web as Rich tweets, "How to get yourself trending on Twitter? Jump out of a space balloon." Well, that tweet links to this graph showing the steep spike in mentions of Felix's name across social media sites. Mentions like this one from Jennifer, who tweets, "Felix's last words before he jumped, sometimes you have to go up really high to understand how small you are." Well, the organizers behind the new project in our next lead are fighting censorship in China, one keyword at a time. FreeWeibo.com allows users to search for thousands of blocked or deleted terms from the microblogging site Sina Weibo. The site includes data from Weiboscope, which collects censored posts. The IP address of Free Weibo is blocked in China, but a representative told the Tech in Asia blog that should be remedied soon. Lastly, Tuesday marks the second debate between the U.S. presidential candidates, and we want to hear from you. President Barack Obama and Governor Mitt Romney will answer questions about domestic and foreign policy from members of a town hall. What issues do you want addressed? Record a video comment by heading to stream.aljazeera.com/US2012. Josh?
Thanks. I didn't watch that live on YouTube, but I saw a video of it today and I tweeted it out.
Very cool.
It's really amazing.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if he had a list of things he could possibly say before he stepped off and he chose to go with that one.
Right.
All right, well, thanks, Malika. Stay with us. The post show's next at stream.aljazeera.com. On Tuesday's show, we'll look into data mining in the U.S. elections. Just how much online personal information do the campaigns have, and can it be used to persuade voters? Send us your thoughts on that, and until then, we'll see you online. Welcome back to the Streams Post Show. We're continuing our discussion on military robotics and the ethical implications that come with them. Still with us in the studio is Sharon Weinberger, the National Security Writer at the Wilson Center. I'm curious what the use of robotics does for foreign policy with the U.S. And what I mean is there used to be a tax if you went to war. There used to be a draft and you had to send the children of the nation to war. Now it seems like if you can take lethal action overseas and there's no risk to human life, it becomes all too easy for a government or a politician. There seems to be very little accountability on the home front when they have these types of technologies. And if you agree with that assessment, you must agree with there's got to be a trend to use them more and more.
Oh yeah, I think what people sometimes miss, maybe they don't miss, but they just don't think about is what really is amazing about the drone revolution is not that the technology is so unique. I mean, it is, but that it allows you to do things politically that you would never be able to do with an armed aircraft. So can you imagine the drone war that we have over Pakistan taking place if it was, an F-16 or something that was dropping bombs? Of course not. It would not be of the rate and the scale. And part of that is that it is a man in the aircraft, but part of it is just really, it's almost like a psychological thing. Like if you take the human out of the aircraft, it's like you're sending in a machine into another country, and it just makes it somehow politically more acceptable. It adds to that sort of not plausible deniability, because it's implausible, but just to a whole type of warfare that you're more politically able to go forward with.
Wolfram, I want to bring it back to you. Beyond the military, how are robotics and automation going to change our lives in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think we will see a revolution in cars. I mean, it started already. Like we have all kinds of autonomous function in cars, like automatic parking assistance, lane keeping assistance that keep the distance to the cars in front of us. And maybe we will end up with fully autonomous cars in certain situations. This is one of the impacts. We see other impacts as well, as like vacuum cleaning robots, lawn mowing robots. So the robots will also make their way into our community, and which is a good thing. I think robots will be safer, right? Robots don't fall asleep, and they can make things better than we can do in certain points in time.
Well, I interviewed Ron Arkin for the Fault Line show that I did on this, and he makes the argument, that going back to military use of robots here, that robots can indeed be more humane than humans on the battlefield. That most of your worst atrocities on the battlefield happen because of humans or who are under duress, who are tired, who are seeking revenge, who are scared, who are protecting their own lives. And you don't have to deal with that with a robot that's artificial intelligence structure is set up around the rules of engagement in more of a black and white scenario. Do you agree with Arkin's position on that?
I mean, I can see his points, but other points have been raised as well, namely the question of how easy does it become to send robots into a battlefield, and how easy becomes it to start a war, and how, like, it always depends on the risk that you are taking. And I think he is right in the respect that some of the aspects, emotional aspects, are taken out on the battlefield itself. Although it's also a hard point that emotions there are no emotions anymore on a battlefield, which is kind of strange. But maybe they are taken away, like they taken to a desk and taken to any kind of office in whatsoever country. And this is kind of the difference, and we should be aware of this, that we cannot get really rid of this.
Noel, are you still there? I want to talk to you about
Yes,
what
I'm
kind
still
of
here.
precedent. What kind of precedent is the U.S. setting for the way they're using drones, and what happens when other countries start to use them in the same way? What if China were start to use drone strikes in Western China on Uyghurs and calling them, terrorists and taking out terrorists? How would the U.S. be able to react because of the precedent? How would the world react?
It's very difficult to know. I mean, China this year, one of the people from the main aircraft company said that they now have an armed robot very like the Predator, and it looks very like the Predator. But what they said was the Americans only sell it to their closest allies. The Israelis don't sell them at all. I mean, they sell drones, but they don't sell armed ones. And the Chinese company said they've identified a hole in the market, so they're going out, to sell them to I don't know who. Iran have two types of drones now that are armed. So it's not just
they also
so much
have a U.S. drone
what
that
will this
went down there.
Yes, there was the Sentinel, which was not armed, of course, and they sent a pink toy one back to Obama when he asked if they would return it, which was showing their sense of humour about it. But there's nothing to stop. Why shouldn't other people have them? There's nothing to stop having them. But it's this kind of deployment of that begins the idea that when you get China involved, they're very good at signal jamming. So drones only work when you're talking about autonomous drones. Unmanned drones that are flown from people with a man in the loop will only work through satellite signal or from radio signal from the ground. And some Texas University people this year showed very easily how they were able to spoof a drone into thinking it was somewhere it wasn't, and so you could cause it to crash into buildings. So while you've got signals being beamed from satellites and beamed up from the ground, and you're against countries like Russia and China, they will jam the signals or spoof them. And so you've got to have an autonomous drone. And then what you've got is autonomous drone against autonomous drone, and that's totally unpredictable. So it's very worrying. And as far as Ron Arkin's concerned, I mean, I know Ron Arkin really well and his work, and we've debated a lot. And as far as that's concerned, it's really, to me, nonsense to talk about the idea of a robot being more humane than a human. Being humane is a property of being human. What you've got is a lump of metal that's maybe got the intelligence of my washing machine, but it can roll round on wheels, and you're talking about it having an ethical idea or it being moral. This is just what you call vaporware or hopeware, and maybe in a couple of 100 years' time I'll be proved wrong. But for now, you're talking, it's nonsense really, and it's just a sort of technical fix that will allow this to go on.
Malika, are there any last words?
Yes, so shifting gears here, no pun intended, there's a sentiment that keeps coming up among our community members. This one from Helen, who says, I totally agree with Professor Sharkey regarding the need for an international treaty. How would robot war crimes be defined? Geneva Conventions are very limited. There's another one from Lorenzo, who says, increase in the use of drones is inevitable. We need to start working on international treaties regulating robotic warfare. And Sharon, I want your thoughts on that after this video comment. Have a listen.
Hello, AJ Stream. My name is Dilesh Sadaka. I am an international relations and eschatology major at the University of Cincinnati. My comment as far as drone technology, I feel that if nations continue to take that path, it makes it harder for them to abide by the rules of aggression set forth by the United Nations under Resolution 3314, which basically states that the nation whose airspace is being violated or the nation being bombed for whatever reason has the right to defend themselves.
So looking forward, will we see an international treaty on the use of robotics?
Oh, not in probably my lifetime, I don't think. I think that's still a little bit of science fiction. I think if you want to talk about the rules of war, you're better off talking about, what are the rules of engagement? The idea of sort of automated killing is so far off in the future, it almost diverts attention from what is in the here and now, which is there's a very good debate to be had over drone strikes in Pakistan, or just simply over the rules of engagement when civilians are in the area, who's a combatant, who's a non-combatant. Those are things to debate, and in essence, those rules, even if we arrive at a point in 40, 50, 60, 100 years where robots really are at that level, those ultimately are still going to be the questions.
Did anyone in the community suggest there should be robotic television show hosts by chance?
Eventually we could see that happen.
How far are we away from robotic stream hosts?
That's a good
This would be the
question.
first show for that, actually. It'd be the right format. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap it there. I did want to clear up, just because Noel Sharkey referred to you as the DARPA lady, that you are not actually with DARPA.
No, and I don't think DARPA would like that either. No. I write about DARPA frequently.
But you write about DARPA.
Yes,
How
yes,
often are they to you writing about? Because they denied our request for
DARPA
interviews.
is traditionally a very insular agency. Some of that they do with good reason. They want to protect their projects and protect their researchers. In my view, as a journalist, sometimes they go a little bit overboard on protecting themselves. It's still a taxpayer-funded institution.
And you don't even know how big their budget is, how much they're getting in taxpayer.
No, their budget is unclassified. They have classified programs within it. I forget what it is.
I thought they had like a whole black area of their budget.
They do, but
the
overall, the whole DARPA budget as a whole, it's about $3 billion. I could be off by a couple $100,000 here or there, including the black. But they do have a significant unclassified portion, or classified portion.
Right. All right, well, thank you everyone for being with us today. And to the people who are still watching online, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We're going to talk about data mining in the U.S. elections and how much personal information they have about you and me, and can it be used to persuade voters. So send me your thoughts, and until then, we'll see you online.